Hello, ladies and gentlemen. You are once again watching Adventure Nut, and I am once again joined by my co-star, the Yellow Couch, and today we are talking about something I am very passionate about, and that is internet privacy. I remember when I was quite young, my father one time made a comment about how we were probably being spied on by all the electronics around us. And even though I didn't know that much about that particular topic, I was pretty tech savvy for how old I was, and I loudly disagreed with him, saying that was ridiculous, there was no way they could do that, and it was very unlikely. Well, a few years later, Edward Snowden happened, and since then a whole bunch of other things have happened that have sort of revealed that he was entirely right. In fact, the only way he was really wrong was that the problems are actually probably a lot worse than even he imagined. One thing that's been really interesting to me over the years is observing how people's response to internet privacy has changed over time. When the internet was relatively new, it seemed like people had a general sense that the internet wasn't trustworthy. I heard constantly from all sorts of people that you couldn't trust who you were talking to, what you were talking about, and even the information you read or saw. And this is kind of obvious, right? Like, you never know who you're talking to. You might be talking to a doctor, you might be talking to, the Hamburglar. You never really know who's on the other line of that chat conversation. But strangely enough, as the internet has become a larger force in our world, it seems like people have kind of forgotten this very basic wisdom that was obvious at the very beginning. And people have sort of fallen into a completely complacent state of mind when it comes to their privacy on the internet. Now, as far as I can tell, there's sort of two layers to internet privacy. The first one is kind of personal general awareness of how we conduct ourselves on the internet. How could the things that we post and talk about be used against us? And then on the other side, there's also what companies are doing, which is mass data gathering that aren't things that we're necessarily aware of or consciously volunteering. And this information is largely hidden in terms of service that we never read. And most people don't even understand exactly what it can be used for even when it's collected. One big problem, I think, is that people don't really understand the value of their data. If I tell you you can access my website for $10 a month, you can make an informed choice of whether or not access to my website is worth that amount because you understand the value of $10. You know how hard it is to come into $10, and you also know what you can get for $10. But if I ask you to have access to my site in exchange for your data, then the equation doesn't really make sense in your brain anymore because you don't really know what the value of your data is. And the thing is that really your data is not something that you yourself can monetize. And so therefore, it kind of makes sense to exchange something that you can't use in exchange for saving money that you actually can use. But the problem is this information can be used against you in quite a few ways. Whenever somebody talks seriously about internet privacy, I see them generally dismissed as either a nerd with too much time on their hands and too much knowledge way beyond what the average person can really deal with, or somebody that's kind of crazy and schizophrenic or a conspiracy theorist. And I totally understand this. There are so many things that the average person needs to be concerned about nowadays that being worried about internet privacy, especially when the immediate consequences of not being worried about it aren't immediately obvious, it just seems like one more thing to worry about in an endless sea of problems that modern people face. This has led to one of the most common sentiments I see generally from people, which is, I have nothing to hide and therefore I don't care that my privacy is being invaded. Now, usually when people say I have nothing to hide, they usually mean that they have nothing immoral or criminal to hide, and therefore they don't care that much that they're being monitored. But the problem of this is that there are all kinds of things that can happen with your data that take advantage of you or manipulate you in various ways that go far beyond just the simple reality of having nothing to hide. I think this sentiment is born a lot out of hopelessness, and I feel like because we all voluntarily post a lot of information about ourselves on the internet, having that monitored to a further extent seems to be kind of an irrelevant point. We know about stalkers and all kinds of other creepy things that can happen with just normal people accessing publicly available information, and that alone is something that doesn't seem to dissuade people much from sharing information about their lives, let alone something that's quietly happening in the background. On the kind of light side of this, we have data brokers that will take and sell your information to a large variety of entities. This means that you can never be quite sure who has your information, and most people aren't even aware of how much information something as simple as a search engine can gather about your particular demographics in life. I don't think people are really mentally equipped to deal with the internet. It used to be when you said something dumb or said something that was only a half-formed thought, it would kind of just go no further than the people immediately around you or maybe the people they tell. But that's about it. If you traveled over a couple of towns, nobody heard anything from what you said and you were pretty much good to go. But nowadays, people can get fired over tweets they make. People can have all kinds of serious consequences purely for things they say on the internet. And I think this is really unfortunate because when we talk as people, sometimes we formulate ideas that are not completely thought out yet. But when we speak about them, that's how we explore new ideas and see if they're things we even believe. People also aren't really free to change their minds on the internet. Because of the permanent immutable characteristic of the internet, it means that people can be judged for things they said long ago, and they may have changed their mind many times since then. But, if every time somebody says something, they say, well, back in 2011, you posted this. Now you're saying that cheese tastes pretty good, but back in 2010, you said on this tweet, oh, cheese is vile and disgusting. I don't trust your motive. Did Big Cheese get to you? Are you an agent of Big Cheese to sow seeds of cheesy dissension amongst the culture? Intent is another thing that often gets lost in conversations on the internet. Sometimes when we write something out or say something, it is really within a specific context or it's not meant to be taken seriously. But in the modern world, or the way that the internet works, a lot of times this context is easily lost or missed by people. And there's also this element that people are really big on finding fault with others in general. I see this really common thing that I genuinely think is one of the things that's destroying our society, which is ascribing meaning to what a person is saying beyond what they are saying. How this looks in practice is something like this. I say, I really like ice cream. I think it tastes great. And then somebody comes around and says, oh, you support exploitative farming of dairy cows? Wow, I can't believe you don't care about the planet. You might as well roll over and die. But this is exactly the problem with the way conversations happen on the internet. When I have a conversation with my friends, they know me well enough to infer the context of what I'm talking about and to understand that I'm not saying things beyond what I am actually saying. But when you encounter people on the internet, your pre-primed ideas of who this person must be based on the points they're making makes us jump to all kinds of conclusions about the things they're saying without them having actually said this. There's also lots of kind of practical problems with being careless about the information we share online. Cyberstalking being one. Another common example is like people will look at accounts, and if somebody's posting on vacation, they know that their house is empty and they can go and rob it. But there's also problems in the kind of more hidden side of it, the mass collection of data from companies. One of the ways this information is used is to literally get you addicted to various platforms. They know exactly what your preferences are and what your viewing habits are better than you yourself know, and they can give you tailored content to make sure you spend the maximum amount of time on the site. This also creates another problem, which is that it makes the whole site less relevant to what you're actually looking for and more focused on keeping you there as long as possible. One way that companies use this information against you is by intentionally showing you things that might outrage you, because outrage increases impulsivity, but also increases engagement, which is exactly what these companies want to do. Both impulsivity and outrage are perfect for selling you products and showing you ads. This in its extreme can be used to manipulate the outcome of political elections. There are many companies out there that use your public data in order to show you specific things that are likely to shift your vote one way or the other. It can also be used to shape your responses to particular policy ideas. Since these companies know exactly what your preferences are, political movements know exactly how to package their ideas so that you're likely to positively or negatively react to them based on the information that they have about you. And none of this even covers the fact that your information is bought and sold, and you have no control over who the end receiver of your data is. In mild cases, it can be disgruntled employees of a company using their access to spy on people. But on very large scale or serious cases, this information can be sold to the government to circumvent warrant requirements. In order to monitor you legally, the government needs a warrant, but they can just buy your information like anybody else and circumvent this. And this isn't just limited to your own government. This can also be taken advantage of by foreign governments that may want to manipulate you or blackmail you to react a certain way within your own country. But I think the real core of the issue is the apathy that the average person has about their own privacy. They don't see any immediate effects or aren't aware of them, and therefore they don't really care that this is happening. As long as there's not a lot of public pressure or outcry for companies to change the way that they are conducting business, and for political governments to step in and regulate, they are going to continue doing it, especially since people keep demonstrating that in spite of these invasions of privacy, they are perfectly willing to continue on using the platforms and services. This has led to increasing levels of surveillance, and now we are going to this point where more and more countries are adopting digital ID. Digital ID is an extremely scary technology where essentially you can't access trains, public spaces, apartments, or even get a job without having a digital ID. Of course, this is all done in the name of safety, and there are many people that are going to completely not care at all and just continue to comply like they have their entire lives. But until we start pushing back, the government and companies are just going to employ greater and greater invasions of privacy until we start saying no. Until we're willing to accept some inconvenience and stop using some services in interest of our own privacy, there will be no pressure from anyone to change their behavior. Do you really want to live in a world where you're rude to someone and therefore you're not allowed to access a public bus because one time you had a bad day and said something? This is the world that China already exists in, where posters publicly shame people who have done things that are deemed to be bad. This can be as simple as jaywalking. In some cases, there are cities that already have systems set up where if they detect you jaywalking, the fine is automatically deducted from your own bank account. Even if you think right now you're fine with a level of surveillance and you don't feel like you have anything to hide, you never know when something in your past all of a sudden becomes problematic to whoever is currently in power, and now you've given them infinite ammunition to use against you. I think it's really important that everyone starts doing some research and understanding the consequences of having all their information out there. I'm not saying to stop using every service out there, but I am saying that it's really important to look at the ways that this information can be used to take advantage of us and to start taking this as a serious problem, even if at the current moment nothing bad is happening. I know this has been kind of a serious, heavy topic, but I hope that I can say something in this video that'll influence at least one person to be more thoughtful about their own internet privacy and inspire some of you to really look into some of the crazy real things out there that's being done with our data. I guess the ultimate message of this video is invasion of privacy isn't harmless, and even if you don't have anything to hide, that doesn't mean you want everybody to know your private information. You've watched Adventure Nut. I hope I've given you some food for thought, and I really hope to move into some lighter-hearted topics in the future. But because this is something I'm so passionate about, I absolutely felt like I had to make at least one video about it. I'll see you guys next week. Both me and the Yellow Couch say hello, sending you guys virtual hugs once again, and I'll see you guys hopefully next week with another video. I have something really excited planned for next time, so stay tuned.